a very good article on the black budget process by this gentleman, Bill Sweetman, who's he's not really a UFO guy. He's an aviation aerospace guy. Did a really good article about 10 years ago on what are known as special access programs, and these are the prototypical black budget programs. At the time, his estimate, there's almost no public literature that really investigates the black budget process. Sweetman did a pretty good job. His estimate at the time was that there were about 150 special access programs. And the real interesting thing about them, one is that he had no idea how they got all their money. But what he was able to determine is that there was little to no oversight by Congress anyway. And they had their own sort of independent, unique classification system. So if I were the manager of one special access program, I would create my system and I would say, you're in, you're out. You have 4 stars, doesn't matter, you're out. You I grew up with, I know you, I trust you, you're in. And that's how that would work, according to what Sweetman learned. And the key thing was that in his analysis, they weren't dominated by the Pentagon personnel. They were not dominated by U.S. military people. The special access programs were dominated by the contractors, by General Electric and Lockheed and Boeing and those guys. They were in charge. And that the DOD liaisons were basically, as he could see it, gatekeepers for money, for funding, and that was basically it. So again, not a UFO piece, but it's a good analysis on how some of this works. Catherine Austin Fitts, who I think qualifies in my book as an American hero, was a cabinet member on the George Bush Sr. administration. She was Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Deeply corrupt. They all are. Catherine, though, is a financial whiz. That was her background. So she goes into HUD, and since she's number 2 at the agency, and since she's the finance maven there, she thinks, well, I'd like to look at the budget of HUD. And she said, she's told, sorry, ma'am, you're not authorized to see the budget. And she's like, come again with that? So she knocks on enough doors after enough months, finally, just to shut her up. They wheel in. She describes this as very humorous. It would be humorous if it weren't so, horrible. Crate after crate, rolling in stacks of papers. I mean, no one can go through these. It would be really almost impossible to. Here you go. She went through them. She said God himself could not audit the United States government. He couldn't audit HUD. It's not possible. And her determination was that at least 85% of the U.S. federal budget is literally unauditable. She also determined, to her own satisfaction, the key importance played by drug trafficking and securities fraud, stock market fraud in washing through the U.S. government. She's got a great article I consider it a modern classic called What's Up with the Black Budget. Go Google it and read it, where she talks about missing trillions and trillions of dollars. This is during the 1990s, prior to 2001, in fact. So then, in other words, that's the end of my second section. True disclosure will have to confront the illegal structure of our society and the massive theft that has sprung up to handle UFO secrecy. So now, what is this program about? Why the secrecy? Well, I think one of the things that they're working on is they're trying to make their own UFOs. I think that's a big part of the secrecy, so let me get into that a little bit. Now, this is not an actual photograph, please. I don't want to deceive you. It's a cool picture. So, of course, I've kept it in there. Back in the 1980s, I mean, this is not going back 25 years, an aviation aerospace writer, James Goodall, who wrote for many mainstream publications, started looking into Groom Lake, that is S4, Area 51. Before the world heard of Bob Lazar, James Goodall was investigating that whole area. And his contacts, his analysis led him to conclude that there were at least 8 black, that is, secret programs flying out of Groom Lake, including a silent triangle. He asks one of his sources at Groom Lake, this is a non-commissioned officer with over like a decade of experience there, do flying saucers exist? The guy said, yes, absolutely, positively they exist. Following up, another source saying, we have things out there that are literally out of this world. This is 1985, 86. Better than Star Trek. So fill in the blanks. whatever that means. George Knapp is an investigative journalist. If you've listened to Coast, he's often a host on Coast. I happen to like George very, very much. George Knapp is the man who made Bob Lazar something of a household word. He was the guy who really did the initial interviews with Lazar in 1989, where Lazar said, yes, I worked at this place called S4, and I was there to study the propulsion system of a flying saucer that was it was alien. Well, the thing about Knapp that's interesting is that he interviewed, actually he said more than a dozen Area 51 insiders. In fact, he later said it was more than 20 insiders who strongly corroborated much of what Bob Lazar said about his experience at Area 51. In other words, a program designed to study and attempt to replicate alien flying saucers, to put it that way. None of them, understandably, were willing to talk publicly. George described a few of these particular cases where he was cultivating certain witnesses, trying to get them to speak. Some of them came pretty close and then were threatened, literally on the day that interviews were being scheduled. This is a great clip you can look up on YouTube, Nellis UFO, or you can look up Nellis ARV for Alien Reproduction Vehicle, and you'll find this. This is a 2 or 3 minute clip. It was a video that was leaked to the American TV show Hard Copy in early 1995. It's been dated very definitively to have been filmed at in November of '94, and it's also been definitively analyzed to have taken place in Ingroom Lake in Nevada. And what it shows is this object coming out and doing amazing things, stopping, zigzagging, incredible accelerations, changes of speed, all within a 2-minute period of time. What's neat about it is that it's got informational readouts here, so you could check the altitude and its position and so on. So it allows for analysis to be done so that we know that this object is about 15 feet wide. Its range of speed was anywhere from 15 or 20 miles per hour up to 500 miles per hour within a 2-minute span of time. Made a right-angle turn at about 140 miles per hour, about, I guess, 200 kilometers per hour. Pretty nifty in 1994. Not too bad. Now, my assumption is that that's something that we, putting that phrase loosely, very well probably made. I could be wrong, maybe it's alien, but my feeling is that's probably something that we've been testing. So another thing that the program is about, I think, is going out there. Why would the secret program be about going into space secretly? Well, it might if you become convinced that there are genuine anomalies on the moon or Mars. In that case, you might think, well, we need to investigate this, but we can't really alert the public because that would blow the whole deal. So we're going to have to create a black space program and just go with some of the technology that we've been developing. I think that's probably the case. Would you have secret transportation to the moon or Mars related to the anomalies there, or anomalies in Earth orbit, of which there are many and seemingly unending? This gentleman, of course, I think is well known to most residents of the UK, Gary McKinnon. One of the things that has fascinated me about the Gary McKinnon case is how in the last 2 or 3, 4 years, any mention of Gary McKinnon, at least in the States, almost never mentions the UFO connection. It's almost completely forgotten now. And when he first got arrested, that was the big thing. Guy hacking into U.S. Space Command site looking for UFOs. Okay, but now he's just described as the world's greatest military hacker, as like this terrorist, okay? When in fact, the guy was looking for UFO evidence. And then he gets arrested. I mean, the whole thing is just, no one in the media is asking the obvious question, which this guy says that he found a list of officer names under the heading of non-terrestrial officers. Well, that's rather interesting, okay? And is it just a load of BS? Well, if so, then why is the United States intent on imprisoning him for the rest of his life? Right? No one asks these questions in the mainstream. It's just completely gone. I think anyone who's spoken to Gary McKinnon, you listen to him speak, you listen to his radio, his interviews, and he's an honest guy. He's just a guy who got screwed, who was trying to find some information out. Was he wrong to do so? Well, yes, legally he was wrong to do so. But I think in the larger picture, it's not hard to see that he's a nice guy. I don't think he was trying to destroy the United States. But anyway, so they go after him. And of course, his life has been really, so far, destroyed. And let us hope that it doesn't turn out the way it may look.